This next section is all about angles, types of angles, and determining the measurement of angles. So first of all, let's define what an angle is. An angle is formed by two rays with the same endpoint. So here's a ray, here's the endpoint. If I take another ray off of that endpoint, it makes an angle. The rays are called the sides of the angle. The endpoint is called the vertex. So they share an endpoint, and this endpoint is called the vertex of the angle. Let's talk about how you can name angles. There's several different ways we can name an angle. One way is simply by naming it by the vertex. So if this point was point A, then I could call the angle angle A. Sometimes you will see numbers inside of the angles, and then you can name it by that number. So this one here would be angle 1. But one of the most common ways to name an angle is by 3 points. So this angle here would be QRS. Notice that the vertex is always the middle letter. So R is the vertex of this angle, so R will always be the middle letter of the 3. You could also name this angle in the opposite direction, SRQ. But angles are always named by only 3 letters. So even if I had another point on this angle, I would still only name it using 3 of the 4 points. So there's several types of angles. If an angle is between 0 and 90 degrees or less than 90 degrees, we'll call it an acute angle. If it is exactly 90 degrees, it will be a right angle. If it's between 90 degrees and 180 degrees, it will be an obtuse angle. And if it's exactly 180 degrees, we will call it a straight angle. And that's because it looks like a straight line, but it's measured in degrees, so it is an angle. Angles with the same measure are said to be congruent. So just like we have congruent segments, we can have congruent angles. If the measurement of angle 1 equals the measurement of angle 2, then angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And remember that we already talked about this congruent symbol, which is an equal sign with the little tilde on top. You mark angles to show they are congruent by kind of using this little semicircle on each of the angles. So just like we have the segment addition postulate, we also have the angle addition postulate. If point B is in the interior of angle AOC, then the measurement of AOB plus the measurement of angle BOC equals the measurement of angle AOC. If AOC is a straight angle, so here you see AOC looks like it forms a straight line, so it's a straight angle, then the measurement of AOB plus BOC has to equal 180 degrees. This is a very important postulate. We will use it again and again as we go throughout geometry. All right, let's take a look at an example. The measurement of RST is 50 degrees, so let's find RST and let's label it 50 degrees. And the measurement of RSW is 125. Well, RSW is the whole big angle that they show here. And they want to know what the measurement of TSW is. It's the one adjacent to RST. Well, if I know the whole thing is 125, I can subtract 50 to figure out what TSW is. And TSW would be 75 degrees. Let's look at another example. Now here we know that DEF appears to be a straight angle. So we know that DEF has to equal 180 degrees. They tell us that DEG is 145 degrees. So let's find that angle and let's put that right on our diagram, 145 degrees. And they want to know what is the measurement of GEF, the one that's adjacent to the 145 degrees. Well, we know the whole thing is 180. If we subtract the 145, we know that GEF has to be 35 degrees. You can see why it's so important to put the measurements right on your diagram. All right, let's talk about some more vocabulary. Perpendicular lines. So two lines that intersect to form right angles. So you see this symbol inside each one of these angles, these little squares, is the symbol that shows that it is a right angle. This upside down T is read as perpendicular to. So I could say that line AB is perpendicular to line CD. As soon as I see that symbol, I know that the angles that are formed have to be 90 degrees. Then we also have a perpendicular bisector. A perpendicular bisector of a segment is a line, segment, or ray that is perpendicular to the segment at its midpoint. If JK, so this line, this red line JK, is the perpendicular bisector of segment XY, what can you conclude about the angles and the segments in this diagram? Well, if you remember, if it is perpendicular lines, they always form right angles, so I know that each one of these angles has to be 90 degrees. And if you remember that a bisector always cuts something into two equal pieces, so I know that segment XZ must be congruent to segment ZY. Well, we also have angle bisectors. So an angle bisector is a ray that divides an angle into two congruent angles. So here we see ray SW is in the middle of angle RST. So if SW is an angle bisector of an angle RST, what can you conclude? Well, I can conclude that these two angles must be congruent to each other. So I know that angle RSW must be congruent to angle WST. All right, let's take a look at how we're going to use all of this information. And you can see why vocabulary is so important in geometry, because if you don't understand what the words mean, then you can't solve the problem. All right, so here's a problem that they give us. Always, always, always in geometry, as soon as you have the information, if a diagram is not given, then you should draw a diagram. But if it is given, you should then put all the information that you're given on the diagram so that you can see what's going on. So they tell us here that the measurement of CTU is 130 degrees. Well, let's find that angle. CTU is this angle right here, and I know it's 130 degrees. The measurement of STC is given as 41 degrees. Well, that's this angle here, and it's 41 degrees. And they want us to find the measurement of STU, which is the whole big angle. Well, if you remember from the angle addition postulate, that CTU plus the measurement of STC has to equal the whole angle, angle STU. If we substitute in the information we know, 130 plus 41 is 171 degrees. So we know that the measurement of STU has to be 171 degrees. Let's try another one. Now it says find x if the measurement of EFL is 9x minus 1. Well, let's find that angle. There's EFL, and it's 9x minus 1. The measurement of LFG is 60. So there's LFG, it's 60. And they've told us now that the measurement of EFG, which is the whole big angle, is 17x plus 3. Well, again, let's write down our angle addition postulate. We know that EFL plus the measurement of LFG has to equal the whole angle. If we substitute in what we know, even though there's x's in here, let's just do a direct substitution. 9x minus 1 plus 60 equals 17x plus 3. Now we have an equation that we can solve. So let's first of all combine all of our like terms on the left side of the equation. And I have 9x plus 59 equals 17x plus 3. Let's subtract 9x from both sides. And let's subtract 3 from both sides. I have 56 equals 8x, so we know that x equals 7. It's always a good idea to kind of ask yourself, does my answer make sense? So let's go ahead and substitute 7 back in and see if our answer makes sense. Well, 9 times 7 is 63, minus 1 is 62. 17 times 7 is 119, plus 3 is 122. So if we add 62 and 60, we get 122, so that checks out. Here's another example. Angle ABC is bisected by ray BF. Well, now they don't give us a diagram, so it's up to us to draw a diagram. So let's start by drawing angle ABC. If you remember, B has to be the vertex because it's the middle letter. It doesn't really matter where I put A and C, however. I could just as easily have switched them and my diagram would have been absolutely correct. It says that it's bisected by ray BF. So we're going to draw in ray BF in the middle of the angle because that's what it means when it says it is bisected. Also a good idea to draw in any symbols that we know have to be true. So I know if it's bisected, I know that these two angles have to be congruent to each other. It says if the measurement of CBF is 35 degrees, well, let's find CBF and mark it as 35 degrees. Well, once again, because these angles are congruent, I know that if CBF is 35 degrees, I know that FBA must also be 35 degrees. And it asks us what is the measurement of ABC. Well, the whole angle has to equal the sum of the two parts, so 35 plus 35 is 70 degrees. So I know the measurement of ABC has to be 70 degrees. Angle DOG is a straight angle. What is the measure of DOG? Well, this is really just a question asking if you know what the vocabulary means. If you remember, a straight angle is one that forms a straight line, and so it's going to be 180 degrees. So if DOG is a straight angle, I know that it has to measure 180 degrees. All right, why don't you put the video on pause and see if you can answer these 5 questions and then start it up again to see if you were correct. All right, name 2 congruent angles. Well, you can see from the diagram 3 and 4 are marked as congruent, so I know that angle 3 and 4 have to be congruent. Name a straight angle. Well, AWC is a straight angle. I could just as easily have called it CWA. What is the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 3? Well, angle 1 and angle 3 form a straight angle, so I know it has to equal 180 degrees. Classify angle 2 as either acute, obtuse, or right. Well, angle 2 over here looks like it's greater than 90 degrees. If it's greater than 90 degrees, it must be obtuse. And classify angle 3 as acute, obtuse, or right. Angle 3 is over here to the right. It looks like it's less than 90 degrees, so it would be acute. All right, complete worksheet 1-4, and as always, ask for help if you need it.